Welcome to the OK Let's Learn podcast. This is two podcasts in one where we dive into tons of interesting books and stories, and another where we dive into tons of interesting topics. So today, let's learn all about paragliding. Yes, if you want to fly like a bird, if you want to experience that thrill, and you won't even have to flap your wings. And in fact, you don't have wings, but you will be able to simulate that by pulling down on some levers and off you go. It's an unbelievable experience. If you're lucky enough to see it, forget about doing it, but see it as Mrs. O'Keefe and I did. We recently went out to Cleveland and we were looking for something to do, and our son said, you know what? Go out to Edgewater Park. It is a beautiful place to go. It's west of the downtown area. It's in Cleveland, and you sit up on this park-like setting, and all you have to do is just sit there on picnic benches is what we did. And beautiful day. You could see the whole skyline of Cleveland. It's just amazing. But as we're sitting there, we were in a trance for almost an hour and a half. Why? Because we just noticed as we're sitting on the park bench, this guy comes up with this like parachute. And he takes everything out, just a little bag, just carrying on his backpack. I mean, we're just sitting there saying, what is going on? And no, it's not a parachute. It looked like one, but it's a wing. It's the glider. And so what does he do? He's got all the strings stretched out, folded here, unfolded here, and then from the flat surface of Edgewater Park, he starts walking down this cliff of grass. It's the perfect place to go rolling down if you're a kid. But in this case, he lifts up his arms, the glider goes flying in the air, and he controls it. He's got his arms up, pulling down these levers, and he's standing there, and he's walking, and he's getting ready for that burst of wind, and there he goes, and he starts flying. It was absolutely amazing. He drifted off to the left as we're watching him over Lake Erie, and there were a lot of trees, and it looked like he was going to go flying right into all these trees sticking up on this mountain overlooking Lake Erie. And no, he just pulls down on one lever, and there he goes, flying out all over Lake Erie, having the time of his life. And here we are just watching him. And sure enough, over the next half hour, I guess it must have been all his buddies, because one guy after another comes. And at one point, there was at least 5 or 6 guys out there flying and having the time of their life. And so was myself and Mrs. O'Keefe. Apparently, this has a window. This particular park has a window where if the wind is blowing 15 to 18 miles an hour, there's really 50 good flying days a year at this particular location. And yes, it's a popular spot. So maybe other people knew it. This was our first experience seeing it. But I said to myself, no, my age, I am not going to start going paragliding. Excuse me, I keep saying power. It's not power. What's interesting is we'll get into this. It's paragliding, because there is something also called paramotoring. So, okay, let's learn all about paragliding. So just to be clear, when you're thinking of paragliding, you're thinking of a guy that's just standing upright, and in some cases you can kind of see like almost like a little seat, but they're just flying, and it is like a semicircle chute, but it's not a parachute. It's actually called a canopy or a wing. It's made from an incredibly strong but lightweight nylon fabric. And the front edge has these openings, dozens of openings. As the guy or the lady, I keep saying guys in this case, ladies, you can also do this. But as the pilot, we'll say the pilot, as the pilot runs forward, air rushes into these openings. The air inflates hundreds of individual cells inside the wing. Once inflated, the canopy becomes surprisingly rigid, not because of poles or rods, but because the moving air creates this internal air pressure. It's called a ram air wing. It acts more like an airplane wing than a parachute. So suspended below the wing are these lines. They're not rope. They're not cable. There's no metal here. They're actually Kevlar, this strong, heat-resistant, synthetic fiber material. So these lines are connected to, I mentioned, like the little pilot seat. It's almost more like a harness. It's really like a comfortable chair hanging beneath the wing. So once the pilot is airborne, he just sits down and he's comfortable. So since this is an audio podcast, let's make sure we understand look at the picture on any post. If you just Google it, paragliding, you'll see the shape of the wing, again, the chute, whatever you want to call it. But people will get confused with hang gliding as opposed to paragliding. The hang gliders are the ones that are kind of laying on their stomach, and the wing is like a triangular shape. Both paragliders and hang gliders launch by running from a hill on their feet, but hang gliders generally will fly faster and will glide farther than paragliders. There's also powered paragliding. In the case where we saw our friends, there was no motors, but it uses the same wing. The difference is, if with powered paragliding, the pilot wears a gasoline engine and propeller on their back. This allows the takeoff from flat ground without needing a hill, without a motor. The engine, in this case, provides the thrust, and paragliding obviously relies just entirely on gravity and rising air. There's also parasailing, right? This is something completely different. The boat, and you've seen this if you've ever been out in lakes, right? A boat pulls a person through the air. The pilot has absolutely no control. Without the boat, the parasail simply comes down. Of course, you got skydivers, and they jump from airplanes. Of course, yes, they have their parachutes, and they're designed, obviously, just to slow down their descent. Although modern parachutes can be steered, they're not intended for hours of soaring. So how does a paraglider stay up? At first glance, it really doesn't seem like it's possible. So how can someone fly for hours without no engine? The answer is really simple. They aren't creating any energy. They're borrowing energy from nature. Warm air constantly is rising from the Earth's surface. Imagine a parking lot baking in the summer sun, right? That pavement becomes very hot. Here we go into a lot of what I've talked about with the water cycle, but we're talking about air, right? Now that air touches the ground, it's also warm. And as we talked about with my previous episodes on thunderstorms, on the water cycle, warm air is lighter than cool air, so it begins rising like an invisible elevator. Pilots call these rising columns air thermals. Birds know exactly where to find them. So that's why you often will see hawks or vultures, eagles circling without flapping their wings, right? We've all noticed that. Well, what they're actually doing is they're riding thermals. Paraglide pilots do exactly the same thing. When they find rising air, they circle inside it. Instead of descending, they actually gain altitude, sometimes hundreds, sometimes thousands of feet. When that thermal weakens, they glide to another one. They repeat this process. Experienced paragliders, the pilots, can stay airborne for several hours. Some can fly over 100 miles. When we saw our friends flying, they were up there. I think the shortest amount of time, frankly, was just 2 or 3 minutes. It seemed like he was afraid of just kind of going all out there, and he came right back. One gentleman was really, you could tell he was really experienced. He was up there, it must have been a good half hour. And it was funny because he would fly across the ledge where everyone was picnicking, sitting and watching them. And he would launch. He must have done this at least, I'll go there again, 6 or 7 times. He launched these like parachute men, these army men, these little tiny parachutes that would come flying from way over the Lake Erie. And of course, he had it down to a science. Here I am, I'm trying to chase it and catch it. And then, of course, there was all these little kids, and I was like, not going to end up being a viral video trying to take one of these little army men landing with his parachute away from a little kid. Mrs. O'Keefe is yelling at me, but yeah, all the kids ended up catching them all. It was really amazing. So I mentioned it seemed like they clearly had control of how they moved through the sky by pulling down on a lever on the right and then pulling down on a lever on the left. This is how they steer. It's almost magical. These are called brake lines. So the pilot holds one handle, like I said, in each hand. You pull the left brake slightly, it slows the left side of the wing. This causes the paraglider to turn left. So you pull on the right brake, and yes, it turns right. Pulling both together slows the wing and helps during landing. I clearly saw that. The pilots also shift their weight inside the harness. The combination of weight shifting and brake pulling down creates a really nice smooth turn. To launch into the air, yeah, we saw this as well, but you need to make sure that the lines are laid out behind the pilot. You got to check there's no tangles, there's no knots. Your helmet's got to be on. You got to make sure that harness or your seat is buckled. Check the wind, and then you begin running. The air enters the canopy and it rises overhead. The pilot makes sure it's centered and fully inflated, and then they continue running. And he would run down this hill, and boom, up he went. That's why if you're going to paraglide, you need to be up on top of a mountain and top of a big hill, and this was a perfect spot. Now, I mentioned this before. Yeah, you're not going to be able to take off if there's no winds, but you don't want too much wind. A light breeze around 4 to 5 to 12 miles an hour is ideal. The strong winds, no doubt, can be dangerous. It's common sense, right? And especially thunderstorms. And I'll mention in my previous episode on thunderstorms, you're talking about powerful rising and sinking air currents. Even experienced paraglider pilots avoid flying anytime there's any chance of any kind of thunderstorms or massive winds, rains, etc. It is dangerous. I remember back in my days as a life insurance salesman, there was a question all about this risk-taking, and I definitely remember, do you do any kind of paragliding, skydiving, anything like that? Most accidents occur not because of the equipment failure, but because of poor decisions. We mentioned it, launching in winds that are too strong, flying near thunderstorms. And this is interesting. I did see this. Pilots also carry emergency reserve parachutes. If something catastrophic happened to the main wing, which is extremely rare, they can deploy their reserve parachute. So, you want to go paragliding? Can anyone learn? Absolutely. No one teaches themselves. Most people attend a certified flight school. Students begin on small training hills. Their first flights only may be a few feet above the ground. Instructors use radios to coach every movement. Only after mastering launching, steering, and landing do students end up moving to the higher hills. Many countries actually have organized certification systems. In the United States, most pilots train through schools affiliated with organizations such as the United States Hang Gliding and Paragliding Association, which is known as, if you need to know this, USHPA, in case you're looking to go out and get inspired from this podcast. But bottom line, Google it, because depending upon where you fly, there's going to be different requirements throughout, in this case, the United States of America. I will say this, unlike driving a car, generally speaking, there's no federal pilot license that's required for recreational paragliding in our country. So bottom line, where can you fly? Like I mentioned, go to Cleveland, go to Edgewater Park, but usually mountain slopes, large grassy hills, coastal cliffs. Specifically, there are parks specifically approved for this purpose. The launch area must have enough room to inflate the wings safely, and the landing area also needs to be clear of trees, power lines, buildings. Clearly, common sense, other obstacles. Do your homework. Don't rely on this podcast to just go out and start paragliding. You need to have the location be certified so you can do it. So to wrap up the podcast, let's talk about its history and if there are any competitions. It's surprisingly new. It grew out of parachuting during the late 1970s. Several parachutists in the French Alps realized that they could launch their modern ram air parachutes from mountains instead of airplanes. So rather than simply just falling, they began soaring. Throughout the 1980s, manufacturers redesigned wings specifically for foot launching and soaring. And then in the 90s, paragliding had spread really across most of the continents, right? Today's wings are a lot safer, they're lighter, and they're more efficient than a lot of the earlier designs. I mean, here I am at age 64, and this is why this is the first time I'm experiencing this, because really this is, in terms of a way to fly, it's, like I said, relatively new. There are competitions. They compete in several events. Cross-country competitions reward pilots who fly the farthest distance. Accuracy competitions challenge pilots to land exactly on a target only a few inches wide. Acrobatic competitions are out there where there's wingovers, they call them spirals, the loops, and other advanced maneuvers that are performed over water. And some athletes hike up mountains carrying all their equipment, then launch and race back to the valley. This exciting sport is called hike and fly. So, how popular is it? Very popular. You've got hundreds of thousands of people that do it regularly, but believe it or not, it's less common than skydiving. Why? Because it requires, like we've mentioned, suitable launch sites and obviously good weather. But in a lot of areas, mountainous regions in the Alps, the Andes, parts of the Rocky Mountains, paragliding is really popular. And finally, I think I mentioned this, but maybe I didn't. The wings are really different and colorful and unique. And you may be thinking, how much does all this cost? It's not that expensive. Let's say everything you need to fly, about $5,000. I've seen that you can buy a lot of good used equipment for maybe $3,000 to $4,000. And to get certified, hey, the path is not that long. Minimum training is going to take you about a week and a half, but the typical time that's going to take, because you got to go out and have the good weather, you're talking about 1 to 3 months. The fastest you could possibly do this, if you were really, if you really wanted to do it, from what I can see, is 1 to 2 weeks. But that's the exception, not the rule. So friends, I hope you've enjoyed learning all about paragliding. Reach out to me at kevmok21@gmail.com. You can email me anything, feedback, requests for certain episodes, anything you liked, anything you didn't like, anything I got right, anything I got wrong. But bottom line, we have a Facebook group, we have a YouTube channel. Check out the links in the podcast notes. Hit that plus button in the top right-hand corner to subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts. Always love the reviews and any ratings you can. Until next time, have fun and keep learning.